so perfect. In 1991, this is such a good story, Romeo and I were on a TV show called Star Search. We won $100,000. The money is gone. Don't ask. Okay, let's play Vegas. Okay. 22 is not a color. All right. I can't believe the Christians laughed at that joke. Okay. 25 years ago, they did not have these great directional microphones that pick up everything. This is a long time ago. 25 years ago, if you ever watch reruns of the old Tonight Show, Carson and McMahon, God rest their souls, okay? You'll see the shadow of a boom microphone, an ambient microphone on a boom. Explain the whole thing. I'm going to. You'll see the shadow of this microphone. It'll go from the boom, okay? And you'll see the shadow of it go from the host face, Carson, and it'll be on the co-host face, McMahon. And you'll see the shadow of this microphone go back and forth during the program right across their faces. This is so good. We fly out to Los Angeles. This is so awesome. To rehearse for Star Search. It's a nightmare. It's a disaster. They can hear me perfectly whenever I talk. But Romeo, no matter how hard I try, no sound. Tell them the lie. The boom microphone operator was moving the microphone from me. We gave him 20 minutes to figure it out. He's a voter. Okay. And a graduate of San Diego State University. Oh, stop. Oh, boo. That's such a cheap shot. We did a show at San Diego State University / Bar and Grill. Okay, you made your point. School song. Duh. Okay. As if you've ever learned anything. I went to college. Oh, yeah. What was your major? History. Oh, history. Mm-hmm. Well, tell us all about the Ottoman Empire, how that affected Mesopotamia, and the ramifications that's had in the Persian Gulf as we know it today. Can I call a lifeline? No. You don't know squat about history. So, history repeats itself. I watch the reruns. Get out of here. Do you know any math? Lay it on me. Here's an easy one. Don't give me the answer. What comes between 7 and 9? Family Guy. No. Math. X over Y equals 10. Solve for X and Y. Here's a better one. CNN over HBO equals NTD. Get out of here, Romeo. Can't read, can't write, can't do math? Mm-hmm. What job could you possibly get? Congress. Okay, fine.
Hello and welcome to Landon Live. My name is Landon Harvey, and tonight we have the multi-talented Taylor Mason. Taylor, how are you doing today?
Landon, I'm great. Thanks for having me on your interview, Landon Live programs.
Well, thank you for being a part of it.
This is the wildest show. I've watched a few of them. They're really great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Well, let's get into it. How did you get into ventriloquism? What's your story?
I started when I was very, very young. My parents, it has a lot to do with my mom and dad, who grew up during the Depression, and the #1 radio program during the Depression, there were no TVs then, was the Chase and Sanborn Hour starring Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy. And my mom and dad loved that show. Now they weren't living together at the time. My dad had lived on a farm, and they had a big console, huge console radio player. My mom's family would go down the street to an aunt's house, and she had a radio, a big console, and everybody would gather around the radio and listen. And their favorite show growing up was the Edgar Bergen Charlie McCarthy show, who was a ventriloquist on the radio, which has many, many ramifications for today, but I'm not going to get into that. How that works, I don't know. Except that, of course, Edgar Bergen was a fantastic ventriloquist, but a great dialogue and comedy writer. And Charlie McCarthy was a defined personality. And actually, a lot of comedians of that time kind of used their style, imitated their style. A famous comic named W.C. Fields came on this show a lot. So it was very much like a sitcom on the radio, because there was no television. My parents grew up with that, and when my parents met, that was one of the things that they that they shared. Or they loved radio. They met in radio. My dad was a farm news broadcaster. My mom was working as a secretary and a Kelly girl, which means she was singing the live commercials at WSOY in Decatur, Illinois. I mean, it's a crazy story. So when I was a little boy, my father one day brings home a plastic-headed, molded-headed Danny O'Day puppet. Danny O'Day being a Jimmy Nelson character that he used in his act. He was another very famous ventriloquist in the 1950s and 60s. And this was the 60s when I was very little. And I'd been playing with socks like Sherry Lewis, doing, shows to my grandmother, basically, with a sock on my hand. And my father decided we need to upgrade and become, a real ventriloquist like my hero, Edgar Bergen. So he buys me this slot-jawed puppet, and you couldn't work the thing. It was made, it had a hole in the back of the neck with a little string, and it was a sock for the body. And my dad, to his credit, said, "Oh, son, let's build a puppet for the body for this puppet." And so we took it apart and cut off the bottom of the head, and he molded, think of a mortar and pestle. He molded a base for the puppet head, and then built a wooden body with the pestle, and it stuck the head down in so it could rock, like a mortar and pestle. We put a post into the neck and a thimble at the end of the string, so I could grab the post with my hand, put my little thumb in the thimble, and pull up and down, and the slot jaw plastic mouth would open. And hallelujah, I had a real ventriloquist dummy, which I named Ted. The reason we named it Ted was my father thought it was very funny because he was very Republican, and Ted Kennedy was a big politician at the time, and my father thought it would be hilarious to name a ventriloquist puppy Ted. So my puppet became Ted the Puppet, and I wrote a script, went to do my show maybe the third or fourth day of class in 7th grade. So I've been practicing with socks. Then I've upgraded now to this real live ventriloquist dummy with a slot jaw that opens and closes. And I'm going to do my show, maybe in English class, maybe at lunch break at the junior high school. It's 7th grade, so 4th day, get on the bus, and these 3 8th graders, I won't mention their names, Keith and Greg and Dean, who said, "Oh, what's in the bag?" And I said, "Oh, it's my ventriloquist dummy. I'm going to do a show today for everybody." They immediately said, No, you're doing it right now on the bus. "Oh, I can't do it on the bus." "No, you're doing it now." And then "Do you guys want to see Taylor do a show?" The crowd, the bus is like, "Yeah." So I stand back of the bus, like by the exit sign. Get out, Ted. And I start my little routine. One of the jokes was, "Ted, if you were my son, I'd give you poison." And then the dummy says back to me, "If I was your son, I'd take the poison." That was my big punchline. They were not laughing with me. They were laughing at me. I was humiliated. I was,
man,
it was brutal. It was brutal. It was so, it still gives me shivers to think of that moment. It was so bad, but I became a closet ventriloquist. And many people say I should have stayed in the closet. I became a closet ventriloquist until I went to college. And then I started working in college doing comedy shows at the University of Illinois. And I got Ted, and I've been practicing with him alone. And finally now it's my big moment. And I started performing and making money. So that's kind of how I started and got into it.
Wow, that's fascinating. So you started off with the socks, then you created Ted from the dummy that your father and you built. Where did Romeo come into play, and when did you decide that you wanted to not use a hard figure anymore?
Okay, so first, in college, I played football at the University of Illinois. Got hurt badly one year. My knee was in a hip to ankle cast. This was 1976, 77. So it was the Stone Age. Where, they open up your knee, they get a chisel, and they hammer your knee, and they tie it together with some rope, and then they tie it back together. It was very. Today, the same injury, I would have been playing 2 weeks later, but in those days, it was. I have a huge scar. I was in a hip to ankle cast. And my fraternity, Sigma Chi, would have these parties, and they allowed me to MC the dances, especially since I couldn't party with everybody. I was sitting on the side with my cast. So I have a microphone. And one day, a guy comes up to me from another fraternity and says, I'll give you $50 to come to my fraternity next Friday night and perform just like this for us. Oh my gosh. You know, the problem was I needed, when I started performing, I realized right away, oh my gosh, I'm going to need content because I can't just go and wing it.
Right.
So I went home, got my ventriloquist dummy, Ted, brought it back to campus and started performing. And then for a graduation gift, I made money all through college doing this. I did fraternity parties, sorority dances, university events, all kinds of stuff. And I was making enough money. It was great. And it was a real eye opener for me because I was making money and I'm taking Econ 101 right at the same time. So, I see how this works. Profit, loss, debit, credit. Oh, this is so easy.
Oh, neat.
So,
okay.
Oh, yeah. It just played right into what I was doing anyway.
Yeah.
So
that was your main job during that time. You didn't have like a side job that you were working. It was doing those shows.
It was the late 70s and disco hit. So my show was 2 turntables and a microphone, not to quote Beck, but 2 turntables and a microphone. And I didn't do any scratching. This was at the very beginning of scratching and rap. The first rap tracks really hadn't even come out yet. At that time, you would just kind of start a record, and then near the end of that record, you'd start the next record. And I was a musician, so a lot of times I would find the key, same key for the 2 disco songs, Casey and the Sunshine Band, Let's Boogie, or I can't remember. Oh, my Boogie Shoes. I think the song was called Boogie Shoes, and it was in the same key as a Donna Summer song. And I would, transfer those both in the same. And then I would take a break with a microphone and do an act with Ted, and then I'd go back to the dance. And it was great. I was booked. Yeah. I was booked every weekend, and I ended up getting these huge speakers and have a show. And then when I graduated, my father, for my graduation gift, I didn't get a car. I didn't get an endowment. I didn't get a trust fund. My dad went to a magic store in Chicago and bought a wooden-headed, slot-jaw ventriloquist dummy made by a really nice man from Michigan named Robert Scott, whose family I would meet years later in Las Vegas, which was really great. And I'd never met him. I'd never met the family. But they kind of knew about me as the years went by. Anyway, I had this wooden-headed figure. So I get out of college, move to Chicago, and I go to this theater called the Second City Theater in Chicago to become a comedy writer actor. And it's, I take my dummy. I've got my new wooden-headed dummy, which I named JP. I'm done with the Ted thing. Sorry, Dad. This is my own act now. I've got my own, right? So I go to Chicago, and I'm going to, I don't interview. I get there, and you're auditioning now. I don't know anything about improvisation comedy, which is what the Second City Theater is famous for. Lots of people currently working there are brilliant. When I was there, the cast had Dan Castellaneta was in the same cast as I was, and he's the voice of Homer Simpson. That kind of gives you an idea of who these people are. They're just lots of Saturday Night Live people came from there. So I go just because I've heard of the place. I want to be part of the comedy scene. I go and I'm auditioning to be in the cast. And while I'm doing my audition, the producer comes in and says, Taylor Mason, it says here on your resume you can read music and play the piano. Yes, I can. So she has me audition as a piano player right there during the interview. It's a simple song. The coolest thing I remember about the whole thing was she puts the sheet music in front of me, and it's a vamp. And the words, the first words I'll never forget are, I hate liver, liver makes me quiver, liver makes me curl right up and down. So that's it. I'll never forget that. So I'm like, this is the song. So I play a little bit like that, and she goes, you're hired. So I got a union gig right away. Boom. I'm working at the Second City Theater in Chicago, not doing ventriloquism, but down the street from the Second City is a comedy club called Zanies Comedy Club. And after maybe a year of working at the Second City, I start doing my own thing, branching out and meeting people in show business in Chicago. And I start going to these little dive clubs or bars or saloons, or some of them were really nice in hotels. They would have a comedy night, or they would have actors come in, singing night on a Thursday night at 11 o'clock. Actors from the local shows would come in and perform, and I would go in with my dummy and do shows. Went to the Second City, got hired almost immediately as an MC, ventriloquist MC for the comedy shows, and that is when I started using my wooden-headed figure more and more. I stopped using it, Landon. One night, I'm on a train going from the north end of Chicago to the south end of Chicago. So I'm taking the L, which is short for elevated train. And the train didn't go all the way. It was a little mom and pop pizza joint on the south side of Chicago in the suburbs, actually. I should get off the train. I have to walk about 2 miles to the gig. And I've got my wooden-headed puppet, JP, in a nylon bag, and it's pouring rain. It's like February, cold, pouring rain, and I'm walking for 2 miles. I get to the gig. I'm late. You're on right away. So I walk up, open the bag, water pours out as if he was in a bath, as if the puppet had taken a bath, which he had. And I take the puppet out. He's soaking wet. Put my hand in the bag, grab the stick and the control for his mouth, but he's warped. His mouth is stuck. You know, so I now, but I've been working at the Second City, so I kind of feel what improvisation is about. And you know, so I do a whole thing with the puppet. Your mouth is stuck. This is gonna be a tough show to do. Can you say anything? I'm doing as much as I can. I killed my 40 minutes, but as I'm walking back to catch the train, you know, I'm in the rain. The puppet is the slot jaws. I decide to myself, you know what? I'm not doing this anymore. I'm going to go get a Muppet-like figure, and I'm going to start working with those. And I get in touch with a guy in Chicago named Frank Marshall, who is a great magician and ventriloquist. And he tells me about a woman named Verna Finley who makes soft-headed figures. I call her on the phone, long-distance call, big deal. And she says, oh, yes, I can send you something that you want. She said, can you send me a picture of what you want? No, I'll draw it. So I drew what I wanted, and maybe 3 months later, I get this soft-headed figure, Muppet-like figure, and I've been using those ever since.
Wow. That's amazing. Yeah. We've had a few other people on here talk about how they came in contact with Verna because they've been using her stuff, and now Marianne and Melissa Taylor have taken her torch, and they do amazing work as well.
I do a lot of work with Marianne and Melissa, and they are lifesavers to me, and they're brilliant. Verna was brilliant, but there's a lot. I like what you do. I like the work that you do. I like Steve Excel's work, Barry Gordon. You know, it's a funny thing because a lot of people think of ventriloquists as these weird loner guys alone in a hotel room with their puppet, and they're kind of psychotic, and the puppet is their real personality coming out through their arm. But the truth is, ventriloquists, for the most part, are really good at working with other people because we need good sound, we need good light, we need good tech, and we need writers. A lot of us use writers to write material for our act. And a lot of us don't build our own figures. You know, I started, I guess, making my own, but then after a while, you know, you find out about these people, Verna Finley, Marianne and Melissa, as you just talked about yourself, and these are professional builders. So ventriloquists are not really loners so much. We are more, we are more involved with a lot of other people than you would think, just because for our act, sound is important. You have to be able to see. You need the great figure. You need great material, you know, to kill time so you can make a living. So we're not really loners.
Wow. So I'm curious with the character Romeo, did he always have the eyebrow movement? Because that's a really unique thing on a soft puppet. Yeah.
Okay. No, I'm trying to think. The very first Romeo I ever had, actually, Verna had built, and it didn't have moving eyebrows. Oh. Okay. And so I got the puppet figure character, and I called her right away and said, I love it, except the eyebrows don't. I thought the eyebrows were going to go up and down. And she said, well, that's very difficult to do with a soft-headed figure. And she said, I've done it a little bit, but I'm not real comfortable with it. And I said, I would pay you extra to make the eyebrows go up and down. Do you have any? And she said, this is what I would do. And so I'm going to bring, this is a Marianne Taylor and Melissa Taylor figure, but this is, what is this? We're doing, you're getting the camera, okay? Try to get, other way. Oh, sorry. No.
Here, let me make you the,
oh, there we go. Okay, whatever. Good, I got it. All right. We're good. So the eyebrows go up and down, and Verna basically told me, I said, I can't really wait. So she explained to me what to do. So the eyebrows are basically a coat hanger, believe it or not. Really? Yes. And there's a thing called a dart gun, which I was familiar with, believe it or not, because I had a grandmother, seamstress. My grandmother was a seamstress, thanks. And she was, yes, Mildred, yes. And you can punch a hole in foam, which is what these Marianne Taylor figures are, and the Verna figures were. It'll just boom, put a hole there, boom, put a hole here, like a lobotomy. It's not like a lobotomy. And then you stick the coat hanger all the way through, bend it so that there's an eyebrow on top. It's just a coat hanger. We just cover it with pipe cleaner. And then on the inside, everybody has their own way of doing it. The original one I did was I twisted the coat after 4 or 5 times of hit and miss. It was hurt. No, it wasn't. I finally figured out that I needed something in there. So I just put the thimble, similar to the one my dad had made with me years before, put the thimble on the end. I think I duct taped it inside the head. Yeah. And I made the eyebrows go up and down. And ever since then, don't put me down. I'm going to put you down. No, don't. So ever since then, whenever I have the puppets built for me, I always ask. But now I'm at the point with Marianne and Melissa where they already know.
Yeah.
They're like, not another, you don't want the big-headed puppet again, do you? Oh, yes, I want the giant-headed puppet. And I can just, without seeing them, I can see them on the phone. And I know that when you're working with foam, I know this from my own experience from doing this, the bigger the head, the more difficult everything is. The sewing, the cheekbones, everything becomes a little more intense. But I love the big heads because I do a lot of work for, I'm in theaters a lot. And now this is changing over the last 5 to 10 years, but for most of my career in these big theaters, there was no IMAG. There weren't the big screens, right? So you would go up there with your soft-headed figure, but people in the back could barely make out the puppet. Right. So as years have gone by, I've convinced Marianne to build these humongous headed puppets, which I love. I know it's a pain for her, but from the audience standpoint, plus it lends a unique, personalized character to what I do with my act. When you're clicking through the YouTube or the TV channels or whatever, oh, here's that guy with a weird big-headed puppet. I've seen him before, But
it's not just the head. The whole puppet is larger than what they're used to building. Right. But it's interesting, and I do the same thing for myself. I've got an old man character named Mervyn, and he has moving eyebrows, but I built him bigger. And I used thicker foam for the head so you could see him from afar. So I totally get it.
But that's more difficult, right? I mean,
it is. When you have thicker foam and you're trying to do max, and it all has its own,
How does this go together?
Right. Yeah, it's a lot of testing in the workshop, but it's definitely neat. So so you were doing these gigs at Zanies and various comedy clubs. When did Star Search come into play? Was that later on? Was that earlier?
So my career, it's an interesting thing because even though, I've worked as a musical director, I've worked as a comedy writer at the Second City, and then I became like an improvisational actor. Clearly by happenstance, because I auditioned to be an actor, but got a job as a musical director, and then for whatever reason, people would miss a gig or something, and I would have to play a part. So I'd be playing the piano for a little while, and then I'd go up on stage and perform, and then I'd run back and play the intro and outro music. And then I started working at Zanies, where I became like a ventriloquist MC. But a lot of times the comics, Jay Leno would be a good example, Jerry Seinfeld, another, Richard Lewis, they would come up to me after, Leno was the first one. I don't know if you're familiar, but I'm a stand-up comic, and I don't think it's really appropriate if you bring me up with a puppet. So just bring me up as Jay Leno, okay? And he pat you on the shoulder. So, okay, I get it. The real comics the hip hot also happening comics don't want to be introduced by Puppet Boy, which I didn't care. So it meant that I had to work on my stand-up comedy, which is interesting because that ended up making my ventriloquism strong, my ventriloquist act stronger, believe it or not. I think because Second City is very much like Saturday Night Live, which is very much like sitcom writing. So it all kinds of synchronizes and blends together in some amorphous goo of comedy. But I'm kind of glad that I had that experience. And that helped me working towards Star Search because I auditioned for that show probably 7 or 8 times before I actually got on the show. And my booking, the guy that was, I don't really work with agents or managers. The people that I work with long term. And the first guy that I worked with was a man in Chicago named Joey Edmonds, just a lovely, wonderful man who got me lots of college gigs. I did tons, like maybe 2,500 college gigs all over America and Canada. Oh my gosh, I can't even tell you how many. Sometimes I was doing 3 in a day. And I did tons of those. And then he introduced me to a guy named Rick Rogers, who was in Los Angeles. And Rick was very, very smart, handled Bill Engvall from Blue Collar Comedy. And Rick lives in Dallas now, as a matter of fact. But a very good, just a really good man, a lovely man, and helped me a great deal. And he said, we're going to get you on Star Search. And we got on, and he was very smart. He said, you're going to win Star Search by attrition. And I think that's kind of, I could have named the book, Taylor Mason, I Win by Attrition. You have 2 minutes on this show. I have auditioned like 8 or 9 times, and I finally get on. He introduced me to somebody who knows somebody who gets me on the show. So now I've auditioned, I'm on Star Search, and I'm going to be competing against other comedians. You get 2 minutes to do your act. And then the audience judges how many, you get 1 star, 2 stars, 3 stars, or 4 stars. And the way we approached it was, we're going to pack as many jokes into my 2-minute box as possible. So the idea for me had been 3 jokes a minute, which would have been 6. We pushed that to 8 with the idea. This is the idea. I'm going to do 8 jokes in 2 minutes. The other guy might do let's say 6 jokes, and every single one of them kills. So he's got 6. I'm going to do 8 jokes. All I have to do is have 7 kill, and then that beats him by 1. So that's how we did it. So a lot of guys too, they would do character. They would do 3 punchlines, just blow the room away. But I would go out and do my 8. So even if 4 of them missed, if 4 of them hit, I win. So I was winning week after week. It was, you go on one, and what they would do, they'd film 2 weeks on one day. So you go on in the morning, do the show, I'd win, come back in the afternoon, do another show, I win, come back the next week, do a show, I win. And I was probably on 8 weeks in a row and never lost, and then got into the finals and used the same mentality. And then you could repeat your greatest hits from the 8 previous shows that I had done, which is I did. And then I won the show. It was $100,000. And it's one of those things where one day the manager, Rick Rogers, he's calling everybody and begging them. And then after that, I'm just getting booked. So now, and then you're getting, because you have a little clout, especially with whatever network Star Search had been. It was a syndicated show. So you go to San Francisco and you do Good Morning San Francisco as the winner of Star Search. And then you play the Punchline Comedy Club for 3 nights. And then you go to Minneapolis and you do Good Morning Minneapolis. And then you play. And so I did that, lasted for probably 3 or 4 years. And it was a good thing. Another interesting thing about that is my act is very punchline intensive. And I had gone to Northwestern University to graduate school. And I had a professor named Don Schultz, who's a very brilliant man, a brilliant marketing genius. I was in a master's program in advertising. And Don Schultz is professor emeritus just for advertising, period. And he had a couple of great sayings. You would hand in a paper, and his whole thing was, whatever you had written, he would say, "Who cares?" And he would write on your paper, "Who cares?" And then when he would hold up your paper for the class, "Here's what Taylor Mason wrote. Who cares?" That was his thing. And so you have to make people care, whatever you write. It has to be something people are. You have to think, maybe my jokes, what I want to write about are flowers, but how many people in the audience in the comedy club want to, you know, I have to write about stuff that they enjoy,
Sure.
or make it so funny that they enjoy the fact that I'm writing about stuff I want to write about, to answer the who cares question. The second thing he taught was be efficient with words and get to the point. And I took that in my career as get to the punchline as quickly as you possibly can, as few words as possible, which fit into Star Search, because I'm trying to fit 8 jokes into 2 minutes. So I was not Mr. Schultz's favorite student at Northwestern University, but he taught me a great deal. And it was years later before I realized, my gosh, this is exactly what Professor Schultz was teaching in marketing class.